Hello, I am so thrilled here to be here this evening to talk to you about how to increase implantation success after IVF. So exciting! Okay, so let's get started. So tonight we are going to talk about all the things that you can do to improve the chances of a successful implantation following embryo transfer through an IVF cycle. So, why does implantation fail? Basically, just before we go into that, implantation is when a blastocyst is around day 5. That's usually when they'll sort of transfer it, and it has been fertilized by a sperm at that stage, so that's when it's called an embryo. And implantation arises when that embryo attaches to the endometrial lining, okay, and then of course it develops into the bub to be. So let's think of it this way. So basically, think of it in terms of a garden. So you are going to plant some seeds for some vegetables to grow. The seed is the embryo and the soil is the endometrial lining. And the season is the woman's health at the time of that time of implantation. So the conditions need to be right for the seed to germinate and grow, i.e., the conditions need to be right in terms of the embryo being able to grow, develop, and implant. Make sense? So basically, when an embryo fails to implant, there's 3 main reasons why this occurs. So it could be due to poor seed quality. So remember, in this analogy, the seed is the embryo. Now, if the embryo is poor quality, that means that it was developed with poor quality eggs and or sperm, because after all, it takes an egg and a sperm to fertilize to form an embryo. So that happens after fertilization. So something's not quite right with the quality of either or perhaps more than likely, both the egg and sperm quality are an issue. Another issue could be poor soil quality. So when we're talking about soil in this analogy, we're talking about the endometrial lining. So basically, they refer to the endometrial lining in the IVF world as being receptive or non-receptive. So either the endometrial lining is accepting of the embryo and allows it to implant, or it's non-receptive, meaning that it's not sort of willing to let that embryo implant in the endometrial lining. And there's a few different reasons for that. So basically, it could be due to the endometrial lining not being thick enough. So generally, the aim is to have the endometrial lining at least 8 millimeters. If it's less than that, then more than likely implantation isn't going to take place. So it needs to be a nice, juicy, thick endometrial lining or uterine lining to be able to be accommodating for that embryo to implant and be comfortable there. And that could be due to a few different reasons. So it might be due to hormone imbalance. There could be poor nutritional status there as well, or poor circulation, because that can all affect the thickness of the endometrial lining. The endometrial lining can also be affected if there's certain things there. So maybe there's polyps, maybe there's endometrial tissue there, maybe there's fibroids there. All of those affect whether implantation is going to take place, because there's kind of less space for it to attach to. So that can affect it as well. Another thing could be progesterone is rising prematurely prior to egg collection, because normally you want the progesterone to rise after collection, so that there's a nice healthy endometrial lining and that it's nice and thick and receptive for the embryo to implant. So if it rises too early, that's not very good. And basically remember that the IVF cycle is trying to replicate sort of a normal menstrual cycle of 28 days. So remember, ovulation's occurring at day 14. Before that, it's the proliferative phase when the endometrial lining is starting to build, and the secretory phase follows day 14 to day 28. So that's when the endometrial lining should be nice and thick and juicy and accommodating for that embryo to implant. So that's ideally what we want. Even in the conditions of IVF, we want that to happen as well. Now, another reason why implantation might not occur might be due to infection, okay? So there might be some sort of infection in the uterus, and that will cause failed implantation. Another one could be due to high NK cells or natural killer cells. So there's something in the immune system that's saying no deal in terms of that embryo implanting into that endometrial lining, okay? When I say endometrial lining, it's the lining of the uterus, just so you know. Now, the other condition to consider is poor environmental conditions. So, i.e., what is the mum's health like at that time around implantation? What is it like? That does affect whether implantation is going to be successful or not, okay? So that could be due to nutritional deficiencies, there could be toxins there, hormone imbalance, or poorly managed conditions. So maybe you've got things like PCOS, fibroids, endometriosis, and these are poorly managed, and this all impacts sort of the conditions that are occurring in the body and whether implantation will take place or not. Ah, yes, okay, Machu, I know of someone who has that issue. So many things to consider. Yeah. Do you mean in terms of the endometrial lining? Yeah, it's a big one. So basically, and it's really interesting because the endometrial lining and the embryo talk to each other. So they've got this sort of molecular signals that they put out, and it's a form of communication, okay? So they're constantly kind of talking to each other, and research, there needs to be more research into this kind of area because it's difficult to know what those communication, what that communication exactly is. But the crosstalk or that chatter between the endometrial lining and the embryo is also important in implantation. So yeah, there's so much to consider, that's for sure. So what kind of foods should we consider then in terms of helping and assisting implantation? Now, as you can see, there's so many different factors that could play a role in implantation. I don't really have time to discuss all of those today in the live. I will discuss in future lives a bit more about each part of it. But today we're going to mainly focus on foods that are going to help increase healthy circulation, oxygenation, and therefore help with a nice thick endometrial lining. So let's talk about those today. So foods to consider. So omega-3 is a really, really important one. It's going to help with circulation, healthy blood flow, and therefore delivery of nutrients that the endometrial lining needs to be nice and thick and ripe. So the good thing as well about omega-3 is it also helps with egg and sperm quality as well. So you've got that kind of double benefit there. So what foods contain omega-3? Well, things like fish, so mackerel, sardines, anchovies, herring, cod, things like that will help. And also chia seeds. So chia seeds contain omega-3, 6 and 9. So that's a good one to include in your diet. If you haven't heard of those before, they're a little seed. You can make chia pudding out of them. So you soak them in almond milk or an equivalent milk sort of overnight, and they sort of swell up. And then you can add things like LSA, so linseed, sunflower and almond, and some berries on top, and that can make for a nice brekkie in the morning, or you can pop them into your smoothie as well. The thickness of the endometrial lining and the health of it, okay? So which foods contain iron? Well, mostly heme-based foods contain iron. So the best ones to go for are kind of meat products. So it could be chicken, fish or turkey. Red meat is another one as well, but don't have this in excess, only kind of 1 to 2 times maximum in the week. And then there's non-heme forms of iron, so they're a little bit more difficult for the body to sort of absorb and utilize, but nonetheless you can still get iron from these foods. So things like dark leafy greens, so spinach, kale, blackstrap molasses is another one. Things like legumes, so lentils is another great one. Also things like quinoa, that contains a little bit of iron. Pumpkin seeds is another one too, that's also a good source of zinc. Nitric oxide foods, so these foods are highly beneficial for oxygenation and delivery of blood flow. So it's important to encourage these in the diet to help the uterine lining. So it could be things like beetroot, that's a really great one. Garlic, leafy greens and watermelon as well. So all of these will help as well. L-arginine based foods. So again, this one is going to help with the oxygenation, blood flow and delivery of nutrients to the uterine lining to help with the thickness as well. So they're mainly protein based foods. So things like fish, chicken, eggs, nuts and seeds, things like that, and also legumes as well. So your beans, so things like lentils, chickpeas, kidney beans, all those kind of things. B vitamin containing foods are extremely important as well. And this is because they actually work hand in hand with red blood cells, and they help to make red blood cells, and they help iron work properly as well. So it's very important to have B12 and folate in good levels so that it can help with iron integrity, so having enough iron. These foods also help with healthy circulation and blood flow again, okay? So dark leafy green vegetables are great, so spinach, kale, etc. Asparagus, Brussels sprouts, beans, so again your legumes, so chickpeas, borlotti beans, lentils, all those kind of things. Also eggs, so eggs has come up a few times, you've noticed there. Broccoli, seafood, so things like your fish, chicken and turkey. So all of these contain things like folate and B12. Circulatory food. So I love using food as medicine, and although I do use these herbs a lot in clinical practice as a liquid herbal medicine, I also encourage you to have it in the diet as well. So things like ginger and cinnamon bring so much warmth and healthy circulation and oxygenation to the uterus and the ovaries. So including those foods in the diet could mean, ginger freshly grated. You can have it as a powder. You can have it in a tea. So you can make sort of a ginger tea. and include things like honey and lemon with it as well. That would be a delicious drink. You can include ginger in your cooking as well. That's easily done. Cinnamon's a great one that you can use in the morning. So you might have, goat's or sheep's yogurt with some berries and nuts and seeds sprinkled over the top. So you could actually sprinkle cinnamon along the top there as well. And cinnamon also has a double benefit of being able to regulate your blood sugar levels as well, which is always great, isn't it? So definitely include those. There's a beautiful cinnamon tea that I found. I just can't think of the name. I found it in a health food store, and that's another great way to increase healthy circulation, oxygenation, and blood flow to the uterus and the ovaries. So very, very important to be including those foods. Erin, yes, so good. Yeah. So good. I'm glad you're getting so much out of it. Ultimately, though, if you want to increase the success of implantation after embryo transfer, you really must consider preconception healthcare. So preconception healthcare is something that I do in the clinic day in, day out, and I'm very passionate about it. And it is based on research. So there's this association called the Foresight Association based in the UK, and they have 35 years plus experience, and they've done a lot of research in using preconception healthcare prior to IVF, and it more than doubles your success rate of that IVF cycle, because it's looking into all those factors that we discussed. So nutritional deficiencies, it's addressing toxins, it's addressing, what the core issues are. Is there circulation issues? Is there blood flow issues? What exactly is happening? But it also addresses egg and sperm quality as well, which is really, really important. Remember that for implantation to happen. And it's not just egg quality, it's sperm quality as well. We really need to focus on the men as well, because after all, it does take an egg and a sperm to make a baby. So don't forget that. Yeah, Erin, that's such an amazing stat. Yeah, it totally is. It blows my mind just how successful it is, and it's so worth putting in that time. I will discuss in another video about preconception healthcare and what's involved, but basically doing that prep work prior to going into IVF is extremely important, because that's what will more than double your success rates. And those rates are based on treating the male and the female, so both parties. So remember that. Now, I'm just double checking that I've covered everything tonight. Yeah, and I just basically wanted to say, if that's something that you're interested in, if you would like to more than double your success rate of IVF cycle, I'd be more than happy to help you, and I'd encourage you to actually book a free 15-minute discovery call so that we can see if we're the right fit and sort of discuss more about what's involved, because it's just amazing, those success rates, and to be able to do that is going to increase your general health, your reproductive health, your hormone balance, nutritional status, address any toxins, nutritional deficiencies, etc. So it's really, really important and key work that we would be doing together. And yeah, what was that, Erin? Wish it was well known. Wish it was more well known that it can help IVF. Yeah, for sure. There's not many people that realize that, and they go into IVF and they haven't put that preparation into place, which is extremely important, not only to improve egg and sperm quality, but obviously the endometrial lining, which can sort of determine whether implantation occurs or not, and as a result, whether a healthy pregnancy arises due to that as well. So it is a shame that it's not more well known, for sure. So that's why I think it's really important that we discuss this so that everybody's aware that there are other options to actually increase IVF success. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you this evening, and I've loved talking about this with you. If you have any more questions or comments, please pop them in the box down below, and I'll go in after the live and answer those for you. Remember, no question is a silly question. There's probably someone else that's thinking the same thing. So please go ahead and ask it if you're unsure about something or if you want to check. No problem, Erin. I'm so glad that you've enjoyed it. If you're watching this on my YouTube channel, please make sure that you like and subscribe to the video, and I will see you next Wednesday, 7:30 Australian Eastern Standard Time, to speak more about something hormone and fertility related. Thank you so much for joining. Bye for now.